I'm Aric, and I have the pleasure of sitting next to Carolyn Brierley and the former Ogden City Mayor, Godfrey. Thanks for taking the time to talk a little bit about the history of the Ogden Marathon.
Thank you for the invitation.
So let's get right into it. I know the story's told once in a while, but what was the conception and how did the Ogden Marathon begin and when?
You know, there's two perspectives to that.
Yours and mine?
Yes. So let's have Matthew start.
Okay.
This will be fascinating to see how they differ. So the goal from my perspective was to bring people to Ogden and support the local businesses. We're just trying to help build an economic base in the community, and we believe that the marathon could grow and be something that would fill up hotel rooms and support the restaurants. And so that was the idea, is to have this be one of many elements that would help drive economic prosperity to downtown.
Okay. And do you remember what year? Anybody remember what year that was? I don't know it.
Well, and so it was the very first year in office that we talked about it.
Well,
but
it
didn't happen until, when
Okay,
was the first year?
so the concept, when did you take office?
It was 2000. But wasn't it 2001 that we actually did the first one?
So in 2000, in the fall of 2000, you told me that you would like, I came to your office and you said you would like to have us put on a marathon. I was the event coordinator for Ogden City. And I said, okay, you already had a route. And I said, let's get the permits. Let me get the permits. And I really wasn't worried because I knew there was no way we would ever get the permits we needed. So at that time, we had to have a permit from the BLM, the Forest Service, Weber County Health, Highway Patrol, and of course we didn't need a separate permit for Ogden City, but I applied for the permits in September of that year, 2000, and knowing we would not get them. Well, in February of 2001, we got all the permits. The final permit came through, and so I went to you and said, okay, we got all our permits, let's plan for next year. And you said, no, I want to do it on Cinco de Mayo. And I about had a heart attack.
Is that what you remember?
I don't remember the heart attack, and I didn't know anything about the permits. It's just something we're going to do. She said okay, and I thought it was going to happen.
So how did you come up with the course? When you went to her and said, I have a course, how did you come up with that?
Well, I had one time in my life run from my house, which is actually in Harrisville, just on the north end of Ogden, and I'd run up the canyon to a friend's house who lived up in the valley across on the other side of Huntsville, and it was beautiful, and it was such a great run, but it was uphill the whole way, slightly uphill the whole way, and I thought and I remembered it was about 17 miles from my home, and I thought, if we could start it up there and run downhill the whole way through the canyon into downtown Ogden, that would be a beautiful, kind of mostly gently downhill course, and I just thought it would bring people from around the country.
Yeah. So has the course changed then at all?
Yeah, so she improved it, which is true. I thought I had a perfectly laid out course, and then she went and took it up, what's the road that goes up to Monty, 39?
Yeah.
And so, she changed it. I had it going more around the lake. And she had it go up there, which was better because it's beautiful and gorgeous, and then it's just a really nice long downhill stretch to start the race.
And I think actually it was law enforcement that said, let's change it.
They saw some things there.
Over the years, there's been minor tweaks. We would change things like going under Washington Boulevard. And we seem to have to change that every year depending on how high the river was running. So finally, okay, we are not going under. We're just going to plan to go over and go up and over to 18th Street and, make it a little simpler.
Awesome.
And the fewer changes makes that planning every year to be easier.
Do you have any recollection of how big the marathon was like the first year?
Yeah.
Small.
Carolyn's got a grin.
We were really happy that we had, I think it was 620.
Wow. That's actually
participants the
pretty
very
good
first year.
though.
Oh, it was.
We were thrilled.
Yeah.
Wow.
We
Okay.
were. But it was, behind the scenes, runners, I don't think, really grasp everything that's involved.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so for that very first marathon, we had to figure out how we were going to get the runners up there, the busing, how we were going to do aid stations, how we were going to get the barricading done. We had so many meetings with law enforcement that included the emergency management of Weber County Sheriff, Ogden City Police, Highway Patrol, Ogden City Fire, for all that logistical piece of it. And that we learned more every year. Every time there would be something that we needed to change, every year we had those meetings over and over and over. And it was huge.
This is, to me, it's just fascinating because now you can Google anything. You can find stuff online, and there's so many races and marathons around to maybe get a little information from. But then that wasn't the fastest route or the thought of idea how to get things done. So it is trial and error and looking for help, right?
You should have seen our dot map parties. So people don't understand when you don't have Google and you didn't have that GPS stuff that we have access to.
Yeah.
So we had these maps printed out and we had the little dots. They were our dot map parties, and we had a different colored dot for the aid stations, for where we were stationing ambulances, where we had barricading, where we had police officers.
Wow.
It was a huge project.
Wow. And of course, probably relied on volunteers, right?
Absolutely.
Just a myriad of people within the city and volunteers. Did you ever imagine that it would be what it is today? Like when you first started it, you had to have some ideas of how you wanted it to grow and some, your positive thinking. But when you look at it today, was there any thought of this is what it would become when you first thought about it?
I'll tell you, I thought it could be a really big event eventually. So what surprised me was how fast it happened. It just was remarkable that we had so many people the first year, which was Carolyn and the team she assembled, and then as we evolved, and there was a lot of problems. Like Salt Lake Marathon kept putting theirs right on top of ours. After we announced ours, they announced theirs, and they kept changing their date and putting it literally like a week before ours.
Right.
And so we had to keep switching it back. There are all kinds of changes they felt like setbacks, right? Every year having to reinvent something. And so it felt like fits and starts getting it rolling. Mm-hmm. But despite all of that, and when the Goal Foundation came in and helped us take it to another level, it was shocking to me just how quickly it exploded.
Right.
Yeah.
We were limited by the number of buses that we could get. That was our limiting factor.
So that was kind of where you
when we were selling out, it was because we could not take any more runners because we could not get any more buses.
Wow.
And we were finally able to work through the state. It was a state law that we couldn't use the school district buses, but we finally were able to work out where we could do an agreement between the city and the county school district. And so then it really exploded, because then we had access to about 180 more buses. It's pretty awesome. Luckily, it has leveled out, and I say luckily because you can't handle too much growth at a time.
Yeah.
It's really hard, but there's still room to grow.
And there's different ways besides the numbers, right? When you
Yeah.
talk about growth, it's not just about the overall runners, but we've got the volunteer side of things. The businesses are still growing and coming into town, and they're being partners with everything. And I just love being Ogden through and through. That's where my heart is, and I just love to hear it mentioned with the Bostons,
Yes.
the New York, all the big marathons, Chicago, and Ogden's always right up there. And I think that's something, as a community, we can be proud of, but I love hearing the stories because sometimes you don't know where things start. And to me, that's the most fascinating part, like just the initial stories, like, hey, we should put a marathon in. Okay, we won't get permits, you know, to where we are today. So, and Carolyn, you're part of the 10-year club, I understand.
Actually, the Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame, my mistake. So the Hall of Fame,
that's
and you
okay.
should be, right? So, and so you guys, the Ogden Marathon holds a special place always with you. Is that is easy to say?
Yes.
And how involved do you try and stay still to this day?
I'm totally involved. So I'm in charge of the Hall of Fame process and help with the 10-year club, and I'm in charge of the VIP tent at the finish line. And
So you haven't stopped.
oh no, I will never stop.
But I stopped. My vision was always that I was just going to run it. Usually the half marathon or the relay, you know, some part of it. But I'm pretty competitive. I want to be. My mind wants to be competitive, and even though, and I just would say to myself, it doesn't matter how fast you run, right? You're just participating. But I could not get that out of me when I had the bib on, and you know, and I was killing myself every year, and so I thought I can't. So I stopped. Actually, I stopped doing all races, and I haven't done any races.
Oh,
the
wow.
Ogden Marathon relay.
Really?
Many years ago was my last
Oh
race.
my
I just said I'm
gosh.
not going to compete anymore in anything.
But you're very active still.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I still see you run on the trails, and
Yeah.
you're still moving around quite a bit.
I like to exercise. I love Ogden and the Ogden trails, but yeah, I don't compete anymore.
Oh, but you still keep a close track of the Ogden Marathon.
Very much so. And my family they love it, and they always want to. There's always somebody in the family that wants to participate. My son took third one year.
Wow.
Yeah, Harrison did. So
That's amazing.
Wow.
yeah.
Well, and I know it's probably not either one of your demeanors probably, but when you look back, you've got to have a little bit, just in your head, a little place in your heart. It's like, wow, you look at Carolyn sees you, and that's got to be a memory. It's like, we were part of this, we started this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a huge team behind you for sure and a lot of support, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's got to start somewhere, right? And I think the stories, people don't often understand where things start. They just run the race, whether it's competitive or not, but the history of it to me is what's fascinating because, I look back and this event is something that Ogden has supported from the start, and it has become an actual, it's not even an event anymore. It's just a piece of Ogden. As opposed to just something that happens every year. Everybody looks forward to this every year.
It's the biggest event. It is the biggest event in Ogden, and it has a huge impact on all the businesses. A lot of people show up just to watch that aren't even involved, that just love seeing the competition and being at the finish line and cheering people on, and the volunteers. There's a lot of involvement of the community with volunteers.
And they take so much pride in it.
They do.
Really do.
Everybody say,
Well, and as I say, Carolyn, you were super successful on getting those permits taken care of. And you are successful in bringing an economic impact and growth to the community. So the two things that started, you nailed.
Well, it never would have happened without Carolyn. My part was very easy. She did a yeoman's work, not just in putting it together the first year and really having it be successful from year one, but the growth of it, right? Continuing with the vision and pushing to find additional partners and people to make it happen. I mean, the marathon would not exist without Carolyn.
Yeah, that's amazing.
without the partners, without the Gold Foundation.
Well, and that's the
Seriously.
thing, you keep bringing up pieces, right, that make it all happen, because you start with 620, and the next, down the road, you're turning people away. We can't have more people.
I think we capped at about 11,000, at our biggest race. We had to turn people away. I think
That is
that was the
amazing.
number, so.
Wow. Well, thank you both, not just for sitting down and telling the story, but for adding that component to an already amazing community.
So since you said that number, when we first talked, I talked about we could be as big as St. George.
Right.
And they had 5,000 runners at the time, I believe. Wasn't that right?
Right, right.
So she doubled it.
Well, that's not bad. Well, it's great to see you both here, Carolyn. Still, it's amazing to see how you just have taken it from permitting to the Hall of Fame, and helping still to this day have a special place in both your hearts this race. So thank you for sure a community thanks you. And it's nice to see when you pass the torch on some level, it keeps going and going with the community that we have. So thank you so much for that, and thanks for taking the time.
Thank
and
you.
Hopefully to see you out there again.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.